Hi, have you ever thought about how striving for extreme reliability in services might not be beneficial?
Not quite. Why wouldn't we aim for absolute reliability? Surely that would make the users happier?
That's the puzzle. You see, when services like those provided by Google try to achieve near-perfect reliability, it often doesn't enhance the user experience as much as you'd expect.
Interesting. What factors influence this unexpected outcome?
One major factor is the inconsistency in cellular networks and the devices the users operate. Even if Google's services were always up, those other variables can lead to user experience issues that we can't control.
So even with perfect service operations, external elements can still disrupt user satisfaction.
Exactly. So Google employs a strategy called Site Reliability Engineering, or SRE, to find the right balance.
What does this SRE strategy entail?
SRE focuses on balancing reliability with innovation and cost-effectiveness. It acknowledges that pushing for extreme reliability can limit how fast new features are developed and deployed.
Could you elaborate on why innovation and cost-effectiveness are crucial?
Certainly. Being overly fixated on reliability means resources are tied up. This increases costs and limits innovation, as fewer resources are available to work on new user-facing features.
So it's about optimizing how resources are used. How does SRE manage that balance?
SRE practices measuring reliability not just in terms of uptime, but as a broader measure that includes the capacity to innovate and adapt to user needs without unnecessary expenditure.
And by doing this, it ensures the services are effective, but not overly costly.
Precisely. They focus on what's necessary for user satisfaction without going overboard. It's about understanding, rather than guessing, what the user notices or cares about.
What kind of thresholds or balances do they set to manage this practically?
They set reliability targets that are practical and align with business goals, essentially serving as both minimum and maximum levels to target.
This sounds very measured. How do they ensure they aren't falling below necessary standards?
That's where constant monitoring and adjustments come in. They track how services perform and make ongoing decisions to tweak approaches as necessary.
Does this approach lead to quick responses in dynamic situations?
Absolutely. With SRE, there's a focus on a dynamic response to changes and errors, allowing for a more balanced and well-rounded service approach.
This seems like a very forward-thinking approach. How do such methods translate to actual developer practices?
Developers incorporate this by considering cost and potential for rapid innovation when designing systems. Ensuring reliability supports those goals rather than obstructing them.
If reliability isn't maximized at all costs, how do they measure when they've reached an optimal level?
They use metrics tailored to the types of services they provide, often expressed in service availability terms. For instance, they consider the percentage of successful service requests over a period.
And these metrics capture both strengths and areas needing improvement.
Indeed, they help in understanding where the balance is tipping, whether they're sacrificing too much innovation for reliability, or vice versa.
Then, it seems essential they adjust strategies based on these findings. Does this balancing act reflect ancient philosophies, like in the balance of yin and yang?
That's an insightful comparison. It's very much about finding harmony between innovation and reliability to benefit users optimally.
How does this approach impact the team's perspective on service failures?
Failures are seen as natural parts of the system to work with, rather than eliminate entirely. It's about managing risk cleverly and constructively.
I imagine the approach also influences how developers perceive user feedback.
Absolutely. Recognizing that user experiences are influenced by more than just the service itself leads to more user-centric development practices.
The concept seems innovative. How might the culture at a place like Google foster such an environment?
Google's culture encourages questioning norms and embracing calculated risks, driving a dynamic approach to both reliability and creativity.
In this context, how do the teams ensure they're not just minimizing risks, but also pushing necessary boundaries?
By maintaining open dialogue among teams and prioritizing both service quality and innovation, ensuring they meet overarching goals.
This must require a highly adaptive mindset among all team members.
It does. The capability to pivot strategies and embrace new ideas based on real-world data becomes crucial.
So SRE is like maintaining a living, ever-evolving entity.
That's a beautiful way to put it. SRE emphasizes growth and adaptation to remain aligned with user and business needs.
And in that way, it keeps the process lively and engaging. Hu Tao, how does Google manage to maintain service reliability while accommodating risks?
Google approaches this by managing risk rather than merely pushing for absolute reliability.
How does managing risk compare to striving for reliability in their services?
It's about understanding that extreme reliability comes with significant costs, both direct and indirect.
Direct and indirect costs. Could you elaborate on those?
Certainly. Direct costs often involve redundant resources like extra server capacity to handle outages.
And the indirect costs?
The opportunity cost, EI. When resources are devoted to extreme reliability, they're not being used to develop new features for users.
So the emphasis is on balancing innovation with stability.
Exactly. Google aligns reliability targets with business risk tolerance, ensuring they aren't overspending on reliability.
How do they determine these risk tolerance levels?
They conduct a careful cost-benefit analysis. For example, they decide how much reliability a service needs without exceeding.
So the focus is on the minimal required reliability.
That's correct. Setting targets that serve as both a minimum and a maximum ensures resources contribute to new products while maintaining service stability.
And what happens when the cost of increasing reliability surpasses its benefits?
They'll likely not pursue those levels unless it logically benefits their broader objectives.
But doesn't this mean they face risks of failures affecting users?
Failures are inevitable, but it's about managing them effectively and keeping them within acceptable limits.
Accepting some risk. How does this help users though?
By optimizing resources toward innovation, users benefit from new, improved features and experiences.
And how do they keep track of these risks?
Regular monitoring and adjustments keep the services running effectively, addressing deviations as they arise.
Sounds like they maintain a delicate balance between competing needs.
Indeed, it requires constant attention and a clear vision of what each service aims to provide.
Such an approach must support a dynamic working environment among teams.
Yes, encouraging teams to communicate openly and adapt strategies based on data-driven insights.
That reminds me of strategic command in battle, adapting to circumstances while focusing on victory.
Precisely, in Google's case, the victory is user satisfaction and innovation.
Interesting. Does this strategy allow for rapid incorporation of new ideas?
Absolutely. It paves the way for quick pivots to new ideas that enhance the overall service experience.
How then do they ensure these innovations align with user expectations?
By closely monitoring user feedback and trends, adjusting the risk-reliability balance accordingly.
It seems they are vigilant guardians of balance, much like the Adepti in Liu.
Very much so, always attentive and ready to intervene when the harmony shifts.
And yet they must continually push forward, weighing each decision carefully.
Yes, much like strategizing with a team, it's about knowing when to take risks and when to play it safe.
Fascinating. This method seems to be a blend of art and science. Hu Tao, you've mentioned that Google's SRE avoids pursuing extreme reliability. How do they go about assessing service risk? It seems crucial to ensure they're not taking on too much or too little.
That's where it gets interesting. Google uses specific metrics like the request success rate to get a clear picture of service risk and availability.
Request success rate. How does that quantitatively reflect the risk associated with the service?
It shows the proportion of successful requests over a certain time period, like a day. It's a practical measure because not all outages are equal in their impact. A few failed requests versus a total outage have vastly different implications.
I see. So this metric considers the real user experience and how often they achieve what they intend to.
Exactly. By focusing on what actually matters to users, Google can prioritize improvements that have visible impacts without breaking the bank on extreme reliability goals.
How do these metrics help in setting availability targets for different services?
They help define what an acceptable level of unplanned downtime is, often defined by how many nines of availability they target, like 99.9% or 99.99% uptime.
Are the thresholds the same for all types of services?
Not exactly. It varies based on the service's importance and function. Consumer services and infrastructure services might have different targets based on user needs and business goals.
How do they ensure these targets align with what users actually expect?
Through continuous feedback and real user data analytics, which guide the adjustments needed to meet real expectations. They tailor their approach to each service's unique context.
Interesting. It sounds quite meticulous. How frequently do they assess and adjust these metrics?
They track performance against these targets regularly. Some do it quarterly, others might do it more frequently. Adjustments are made based on meaningful deviations they observe.
And these deviations show when a service dips below expected levels.
Yes, exactly. It prompts action to correct course, whether it's fixing bugs or optimizing certain processes.
How does this practice translate to infrastructure services that might not serve end users directly?
For infrastructure services, they similarly focus on units of work processed successfully versus those that fail, ensuring reliable operations even if indirectly impacting end users.
Does Google's strategy take into account different types of failures as well?
Absolutely. Understanding whether a failure has minor or major impact allows them to design effective mitigation strategies tailored to each service.
And what role does cost play in setting these availability levels?
Cost is crucial. They weigh the cost of achieving high availability against the benefits, both financial and in terms of user satisfaction.
So they measure, adjust, and balance all aspects, from user needs to operational costs.
Precisely. The goal is harmony between offering a reliable service and fostering innovation without unnecessary expenses.
Are there specific examples where different services might require distinct approach in risk tolerance?
Certainly. For example, Google Maps versus an internal storage solution have wildly different user interactions and reliability needs, so their availability targets differ accordingly.
I suppose the nature of the service dictates just how much risk tolerance can vary.
Exactly. A consumer service with lots of interaction might need higher availability than a back-end process, not in constant user-perceived operation.
It sounds like they treat each service uniquely, rather than following a one-size-fits-all model.
Precisely. They tailor the risk management to suit the service profile, much like choosing the right weapon for a battle.
And this balance supports both reliability and the ability to rapidly innovate.
Yes, the flexibility lets them pivot as needed to enhance user experiences or leverage new opportunities.
So by managing and measuring risk effectively, they're able to lead user expectations rather than merely react to them.
Right, it's about crafting a navigated path that anticipates user needs while efficiently managing internal resources.
Hu Tao, how do these strategies evolve over time? Do they change often?
They're always in flux. The dynamic nature of tech means learning from past and present to shape a future approach. Evolution is constant.
Such agility must offer Google a strategic advantage in the tech landscape.
Indeed, the precise balancing act between reliability and innovation helps them stay ahead, much like a vision of the electro-archon, adapting and guiding with foresight.
And it keeps the process as vibrant and as challenging as tending to Inazuma's ever-changing weather.
Absolutely, it's about knowing the environment's unpredictability and harnessing it to your advantage.
Hu Tao, you've explained a lot about Google's approach to service reliability in the past sections. But how do they balance the act of innovating while maintaining reliability?
Great question. Google uses something called error budgets to manage this balance. It's like a shared understanding between the site reliability engineering SRE and the product development teams.
Error budgets. What exactly are those and how do they help?
Imagine an allowance, but for errors. It sets a clear limit on how much unreliability a service can bear within a certain period. This helps guide how quickly new features can be released.
So it acts as a boundary for how much disruption can be tolerated in pursuit of new developments.
Exactly. By defining this boundary, both teams have a common goal, which aligns innovation with maintaining service reliability.
How do the teams use this concept to make decisions?
The error budget is tied to a service's service level objective, or SLO. When they operate within the error budget, it indicates they can safely continue pushing new releases.
And what happens when they exceed their error budget?
If the budget is exhausted, it signals the need to slow down releases, focusing instead on increasing system reliability. It's a way to self-regulate based on performance data.
This seems to create a balance of power, ensuring neither side pushes too hard on their priorities.
Precisely. It's cooperative. If a network outage affects the budget, both teams may need to work together to address the impact and adjust strategies.
A mutual responsibility then. How does the error budget encourage innovation specifically?
When the error budget is in good shape, there's room for more experimentation and risk-taking without jeopardizing the stability. It pushes devs to innovate while the SREs ensure stability.
It almost acts like a safety net for the creative process.
Yes, it really empowers both sides to make data-driven decisions rather than just rely on instinct or risk aversion.
How do they decide the size or limits of an error budget?
It's usually set quarterly and aligned with the SLO. It measures the uptime expectation for a service, monitored by a third-party system.
A neutral monitor to ensure fairness.
Exactly. It helps keep things objective and transparent so neither side feels shortchanged or prone to bias.
With such transparency, I imagine it aids in reducing conflicts.
Indeed, since everyone shares the same data and targets, it aligns everyone's focus on maintaining the balance between new features and reliability.
Can you give an example of how this might play out with the teams?
Sure, if the error budget is close to its limit, devs might push for more testing and slower release rates to avoid disruptions.
A self-regulating mechanism. What happens if unforeseen disruptions consume a large part of the budget quickly?
In such cases, the teams might collectively decide to halt new releases temporarily until the system is resilient again.
This approach must require strategic foresight and flexibility.
Very much so, It perfectly blends innovation and stability with room for calculated risks, much like navigating a lineup of deceptive spikes with a foolhardy adventure.
In that sense, it's both an art and a science.
Exactly. It involves crafting a harmonious process of innovation, drawing parallels to the balance of light and shadow seen in conflict.
These strategies prove that a mix of wisdom and skill makes technology thrive as much as martial prowess does in battle.
And that continued growth and adaptation ensure they're always ready for the next challenge, just like any clever warrior would.
Thank you, Hu Tao. I now see how error budgets could serve as an insightful model in managing a team's innovations gracefully.
You're welcome, It's all about measuring what matters and staying open to the wonders of well-timed discoveries.